Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And do you know what? This feels like deja vu. It's like I've spent years talking about how Brexit was going to damage the UK economy and then did damage the UK economy. And now I'm doing the same thing, but for America. Do Americans realise that Trump is basically their Brexit? So imagine the government of a Western country saying that the state should have shares in large corporations because as the state subsidises these companies, it should also share in the profits and have a say in the running of the company. Now imagine this Western country is the ultra free market capitalist America and the government is that of not Bernie Sanders, but Donald Trump. I kid you not. Trump is trying, actually succeeding in some cases, to extract stakes in large corporations like Intel and Nvidia. Not as part of bailouts as Obama did, but as part of his transactional attitude towards everything. So the undisputed king of the Republicans wants partial state control of some of the biggest corporations in the world. Now, don't check your calendar. It's not April the 1st. And this is real. I wonder what the tech bros think of their purchase now. But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So to say Trump was fuel to a return to power on the backs of support from the so-called tech bros, Trump's policies pose a number of threats to Silicon Valley. Before we get onto this scheme of Trump's for shares, let's consider the wider landscape for big tech companies in America because it's not been going their way. To understand the problems facing big tech, you've got to look at that, first of all, that one big beautiful bill, what it actually does. I mean, it's a massive tax law. We get that, right? Huge tax cuts for the rich. We got that, including large tech corporations. It permanently extends the individual tax rates from 2017, tax cuts and Jobs Act. It reinstates business-friendly provisions like 100% bonus deprecation for equipment. All sounds dandy for them, but it also phases out clean energy credits, which is a massive blow to tech companies invested in green initiatives. Second, more significantly, the bill fundamentally transforms immigration policy. It allocates tens of billions of dollars for, the border wall, expanding detention facilities, hiring more enforcement agents, and it also introduces a host of new fees for humanitarian-based immigration, such as a non-waivable $100 fee to apply for asylum, $550 fee for initial work permit for asylum seekers and others. And it makes a major shift in federal spending. The bill dramatically increases military spending while cutting funds for environmental programs, including rescinding the money for the methane emissions reduction program and grants for environmental justice initiatives. It's a clear signal of the administration's priorities, defence and immigration enforcement over environmental and social programs. So how does this affect big tech? Well, the impact isn't a direct order, but it's a ripple effect. This is an industry reliant on attracting the best minds from around the world. The new immigration landscape is a massive hurdle to that. The new fees and enforcement-heavy approach creates a significant barrier for these highly skilled foreign talent that companies like Google, Microsoft, Apple, Nvidia, Intel depend on to innovate. The message sent by these policies could make the USA a less attractive destination for the world's top engineers and researchers, particularly where even if they do get a visa, the hostile environment there may not be the most comfortable for them. The economic shifts also create new winners and losers. You've got business-friendly tax provisions, so the immediate deduction for R&D expenses. Tech firms love that. But the bill's broader focus is elsewhere. The rollback of clean energy credits, environmental programs, that runs counter to the sustainability goals championed by a lot of Silicon Valley's biggest names. Furthermore, the massive increase in the national deficit, which is projected to grow by trillions, could lead to higher interest rates and economic instability in the long term. Trump is only focused on the short term. These tech companies have got to think long term. That creates a risky environment for the long-term investments that drive the tech sector. We already sort of think, or a lot of people think, that the tech sector in America is overpriced already. So this could actually precipitate a crash at some point. The motivation behind Trump's bill is a doctrine of economic nationalism. The administration's goal is to reshape the economy to prioritise domestic industries and a specific vision of national security. The massive spending on border security and immigration enforcement is designed to drastically reduce legal and illegal immigration, reflecting a core campaign promise. The tax and spending provisions work in tandem with that goal by extending tax cuts and adding new deductions for things like overtime pay and car loans for US assembled cars. The administration is trying to put more money into the pockets of working class Americans as long as they buy American, right? Even though the reality is the opposite, because you have to consider the Trumpflation that his policies are causing. Simultaneously, though, by cutting environmental programs and benefits for immigrants, the bill redirects federal resources away from priorities associated with a more globalist worldview and towards a domestic America First agenda. Now, for big tech, which has long thrived on globalization, the free movement of talent and a stable international order, this represents a very hostile policy environment. And now President Trump is demanding government stakes in US companies and cuts of their revenues, which is a weird way to phrase it, because the usual way a government takes a cut of revenues is with tax. And the usual way a government says we want a say in the way you run your business is by regulation. But possibly because Trump wants to be seen as a tax cutter and a deregulator, right? And because he's actually trying to become a mob boss, he's taken the approach of extortion and shakedowns over the more normal tax and regulation route. Trump says that these companies get tax breaks, so should give the government a stake in return. Why not just get rid of the tax breaks then if you don't think they're giving value for money? Or increase corporation tax, or increase regulation. Trump is a very weird guy. Wants his corporations to give the government more money and, for the government to have a bit of a say in how they're run, but uses menaces instead of just handing them a tax bill and legislating, like a normal government would. That being said, it's working. Trump has won a stake in US Steel and Intel and is after Nvidia, as according to the New York Times. But with the government actively taking shares in these companies, Trump is adopting the ideas of social democracy rather than free market economics, isn't he? The government is buying these shares, by the way. They're not just being, handed over under threat of a baseball bat. But the idea of the government having a stake in large corporations like this, it's a very weird concept for the USA, isn't it? That this would emerge not from like a socialist government in Europe or Asia who's going, we should have, the government should have a stake in these companies and, like workers on the board, like in Germany or something. But the ultra free market capitalist USA, and from a Republican president, that's blown my mind. This is the state having partial ownership of corporations. What do Republicans in Congress think of this? May not matter, they seem quite tame at the moment, but the tech pros are not happy. And the response from the tech industry is fairly complex as they have to deal with not just a very stupid president, but one who is extremely vengeful as well, gets upset very easily. So while companies will benefit from some of the corporate tax changes, they will have to push back against the policies that threaten their talent pipeline and operational stability. The first front will be lobbying, of course. Tech giants will likely focus their efforts on mitigating the impacts of the new immigration rules, arguing that they undermine American competitiveness by shutting out essential talent. We saw the same thing with Brexit in the UK. Companies will argue they should have special carve-outs from the rules. If Trump is anything like the Brexit Tories, their pleas will fall on deaf ears. Like we saw the pushback, didn't we, at the start of the year from the likes of Loomer and Bannon, when Trump seemed to agree with Musk that there should actually be an easing of immigration rules for the sort of skilled workers that the tech industry depends on. The second front will be strategic and operational. Companies may actually have to rethink their global staffing, potentially expanding R&D operations in more immigration-friendly countries. That would, of course, have the opposite effect to the one Trump wants to see. He wants to see these companies moving more of their operations from other countries to America. This would do the opposite. But if you need to attract the world's best engineers and you can't set them up in the USA, you are going to have to build research facilities elsewhere for them to work, aren't you? And that will mean closing some of your American operations. Simple as that. Finally, there will be a public relations battle. Tech leaders who've often built their brands on ideals of openness and globalism will be forced to choose their poison. Do they quietly accept the benefits of the tax cuts whilst ignoring the broader social and immigration changes risking being overtaken by competitors in, say, China or India? Or do they publicly challenge an administration that has made those changes its centrepiece? That creates a difficult choice. Align with the new nationalism or champion the globalist values that helps build their empires. Both carry very serious risks to their future competitiveness. But separate to that, this also provides an opportunity for other countries. Trump thinks he's adopting America First policies, but because he doesn't understand the consequences of his actions, the results are looking very different. It's a little bit like when Brexiteers thought leaving the EU would reduce immigration, and then it massively increased, because they didn't actually understand how immigration works. Trump is making America a very difficult place to research and manufacture now. He thinks he's encouraging companies to do more research and manufacture in the US. No, he's making it harder. This may provide an opportunity for other countries to fill the void. But let me know what you think in the comments below. For more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.